This ranger started his day with a call he couldn't believe. There was an elephant in a tree. When the ranger got there and tried to get the elephant to leave, the animal wouldn't budge. When the ranger found out why, all color drained from his face. But what did he see? Why did the elephant refuse to leave the tree? Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. Frank was driving around the perimeter of the nature reserve as he did every day to check on the fences around it. It was just a regular day, but he soon got a strange call from a colleague that would make things more interesting. Frank thought it was a joke at first, but his colleague sounded so serious on the phone, he thought he would check it out for himself. A short drive later, Frank arrived at where his colleague was, and his mouth fell open. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, and his worries got worse when he noticed they were dealing with a baby elephant in a tree. Did it get lost from the herd? The two rangers looked at each other, at a loss about what to do. Frank's first thought was that the baby elephant was just stuck, and that's why it couldn't get down. This was the first time something like that happened, though. After racking their braids for a few minutes, Frank and his colleague finally came up with something. They would fetch some animal feed from the car and lure the baby elephant to get down. That's exactly what they did. They showed the elephant the animal feed and talked to it very softly, asking it to come down. However, the baby elephant didn't move an inch, so it was time to think of something else. Moments later, Frank remembered something. It turns out that day, a team of rangers was transporting a rhino into the reserve. That means they were using a crane, and if they were still on site, that could be very helpful. When Frank shared this with his colleague, they were both very hopeful this would work. They had no idea how things would take a turn. Frank grabbed the portable radio to contact headquarters, and luckily, the crane was still in the reserve. He asked for the contact information of the team and managed to get their help. Eventually, they arrived with the crane, and with some effort and teamwork, they managed to get the baby elephant out of the tree. When the animal was safely on the ground, they all celebrated. But then, something unexpected happened. But before we get to that, give this video a thumbs up to help it reach 10K likes and subscribe to the channel. Frank and his colleague were setting the elephant free, and the moment it touched the ground, it ran back toward the tree and climbed up it. The baby elephant moved so fast that everyone was surprised. The whole team was shaken by this because they thought that the animal was stuck, and they were now realizing that it wanted to be up in the tree. But why? No one could understand it. Everyone was silent, trying to find some kind of explanation, but the silence was interrupted by an incoming SUV. It was another ranger, and he had some awful news. There was a break-in at the reserve during the night. Frank ran to grab his tablet, where he had access to all the camera feeds, and he started to rewind the footage on the relevant camera. And then, they saw it. In the footage, a group of poachers were tearing down the fence. But it was strange because neither Frank nor his colleagues had seen anything out of the ordinary when they checked the perimeter. Were the poachers still in the reserve? Did they manage to take something? To find answers, Frank had to follow the poachers on the feed, but the cameras only covered part of the reserve, so they were difficult to track. With some effort and a bit of luck, Frank managed to find the poachers again in the footage, and he saw that they approached an elephant herd. The herd scattered and ran, so the poachers must have made noise. Then, one of the colleagues approached Frank and pointed at something in the footage. It was the baby elephant, and it ran toward the tree while the poachers were chasing it. At one point, the baby elephant was surrounded by the poachers when, suddenly, the circle broke. A female elephant had entered the scene, and that gave enough time to the baby elephant to climb the tree. But that's not where things ended. The poachers shifted their attention to the adult elephant. Frank realized then that the poachers had used the baby elephant as bait because they knew the mother would try to help. Their plan worked because they were able to capture her and take her out of the reserve. Then, it finally dawned on Frank why the baby elephant didn't want to leave the tree. It thought they were poachers, and it didn't feel safe. With that in mind, he started forming a plan. It was clear that they had to rescue the mother, and once they had her, they could make the baby elephant feel safe enough to come down from the tree. They got to work and notified the police to get answers as quickly as possible. The police arrived a while later, and the sheriff knew exactly who the poachers were. He recognized the way they worked because he had been trying to catch them, but they were elusive. The sheriff continued to explain that these poachers had already broken into several reserves nearby, and that's why they were able to get here so quickly. Frank made it clear to the police that everyone was ready to assist in any way they could. Fortunately, the sheriff was hopeful because this was the first time they could arrive at the crime scene the next day. Usually, they arrived 2 days later because the poachers were good at hiding what they did, so the police never got notified right away. Additionally, it seemed like the poachers struck twice, so there was a possibility they would return to the reserve that night. That would be their chance to catch them, so the police and the rangers started working on a plan. Frank assumed the poachers would come through the hole they made last night, but the sheriff told him the poachers always made a new entrance. With that in mind, Frank looked at the map of the reserve and marked several spots, which is where the cameras were. Based on that information, both the police and the rangers concluded that the poachers would likely enter by the riverbank. That was a great location because they could use trees and other elements in the environment to trap animals. With that, they started herding elephants and rhinos toward the riverbank to give poachers even more of a reason to enter through there. The rangers and police officers also decided to camouflage themselves and scatter around the location to keep an eye on the area and be ready when the poachers came. When night fell, everyone was in their designated spots and the wait began. At one point, Frank checked the camera feed and he caught some movement on one of the cameras at the fence. That fence was directly behind them, so the poachers were close. Frank continued watching the camera feed and he saw the poachers getting closer and closer. When the poachers passed them by, the sheriff yelled, "Now!" and everyone jumped out of their hiding spots. The poachers were caught red-handed and the arrest went swiftly. Their poaching days were over. As you can imagine, Frank and everyone else involved felt very satisfied about the operation. But there was one more thing to do: find the mother elephant. "Come on," Frank yelled while gesturing for his colleagues to come with him. The rangers got on their trucks and started driving with the police following suit. The poachers' camp wasn't far from the reserve, but there were no cages and the mother elephant was nowhere to be seen. Were they too late? Had it all been for nothing? Just as Frank was thinking this, he heard a sound. He heard the rattling of chains and low breathing sounds, and they were coming from behind some bushes. Frank approached the bushes and he realized they were hiding something, so he moved them. That's when he found the cage and the mother elephant. It was a success! The rangers immediately attached the cage to the truck and transported the animal back to the reserve. Now it was time to see if the baby elephant would come down from the tree. They took the mother elephant to where that unusual day started, and they didn't know what would happen, but they were hopeful. When they opened the cage, the mother elephant slowly stepped out. In a flash, the baby elephant was down from the tree, reuniting with its mother. "What a day," Frank said while he celebrated the happy moment with his colleagues. When he woke up that morning, he never thought this was how his day would go, but he was happy. Not only did they rescue the mother elephant and reunite her with her baby, but they also helped get the poachers arrested. The sheriff thanked Frank and the rest of the rangers for their help and support. He acknowledged that the police wouldn't have caught the poachers without them, and it was a great day for everyone. What do you think of this story? Did you know elephants were so protective of their own? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more. Catch you in the next video.